Sometime in the late 1980s, on the back of a dive boat off the Kona coast, two men shook hands on a promise. They had just finished a scuba lesson. One was the Grateful Dead's drummer, the other was its lead guitarist, and both had, for very different reasons, decided that one day, when this whole long, strange trip was finally over, they would move to Hawaii. Bill Kreutzmann told the story for the first time in his 2015 memoir Deal. He retold it almost word for word in Hawaiian Airlines in-flight magazine Hana Ho in 2019. Jerry Garcia stood right beside him on that boat. They were as serious as could be, Bill said. They shook on it.
It's hard to remember what, it just wasn't working, you know. I actually remember the things that made it work.
8 years later, Jerry Garcia was dead. And here's the part nobody tells you.
The drugs played the worst, the baddest part of that, more than the personalities even, because the drugs were the catalyst for bad personalities.
Bill Kreutzmann did move to Hawaii. He kept the Pact, but he kept it alone. And he kept it after spending months trying to get the Grateful Dead off the road, watching Jerry's body collapse in real time on a tour that already felt like it was heading toward tragedy. Most coverage of 1995 treats Jerry's death like a sad inevitability. The drugs caught up, the diabetes caught up, the road caught up. Pick your villain. But there was one member of that band, the quietest one, the one who almost never gave interviews, the one who eventually walked away from the entire operation and disappeared, who saw what was coming.
I saw magic that you don't see in everyday people.
And what he did when nobody listened is the part of this story that has never been told properly, until now. Two men shook hands on that boat. Only one of them lived to keep the promise. The summer 1995 tour, what fans now call the Tour from Hell, opened on June 15th at Franklin County Field in Highgate, Vermont. Bob Dylan opened. 20,000 ticketless fans showed up. The band opened the gates to keep them from getting crushed against the fences.
Whenever there's something that is so gigantic and there's so many people involved, I know for a fact after doing this a number of years, there's always going to be some of that stuff around. There's no perfect concert.
10 days later, RFK Stadium, Washington, D.C. 3 concert-goers took shelter under a tree during a thunderstorm. Lightning struck. One of them, Kristen Daniel, 20 years old, from Danville, Virginia, was found in cardiac arrest. Other deadheads gave her CPR. She survived on a respirator. 2 others were stabilized. The show went on at 6 p.m. as scheduled. Quick correction. Most YouTube videos about this tour will tell you 2 fans died at RFK from lightning. That's wrong. 3 were injured, 0 were killed.
Yes, some of the stuff is completely wrong. You know, just little details, minor stuff, you know, devil's in the details, but it wasn't correct, you know.
The Washington Post, Roanoke Times, and UPI all confirm it. Don't believe the cleaner version of the story. July 2nd, Deer Creek, Indiana. The FBI investigated a credible death threat against Garcia phoned in that morning. Metal detectors went up. Security observers sat in the catwalks above the stage with binoculars. Soundcheck audio caught a backstage joke, Garcia. It's weird when all those cameras look like guns. Mickey Hart, immediately. Don't say the G word. 1,000 gatecrashers tore down a plywood fence during set 2. Bottles flew. Tear gas went in. The next night's show was canceled. The first time in 30 years the Grateful Dead had ever pulled a date for crowd violence. But the worst night of the tour wasn't Deer Creek. It was a story almost nobody tells. July 5th, around 11:30 p.m., Pinewoods Camping and Fishing Park, Wentzville, Missouri. Roughly 5,000 deadheads were camped between the 2 Riverport amphitheater shows. A 70-foot covered wooden deck, packed with fans sheltering from a thunderstorm, collapsed. 108 people injured, a dozen hospitalized, 4 in critical condition. Tracy Van Poole, 20 years old, ended up with 3 metal plates in her shattered pelvis after 5 surgeries. Earlier that same day, 2 other fans had died at the same campground from drug overdoses. That tour killed people before Jerry ever did. Bill Kreutzmann was watching it happen from behind his drum kit. Here's where most YouTube takes get sloppy. The popular version of this story says Bill Kreutzmann begged the band to stop touring in 1995, that he tried to force a vote, that Bob Weir blocked him, and that the others were too greedy or scared to listen. It's a clean, satisfying narrative. It's also not exactly what Bill wrote. In Deal, and in the Wall Street Journal interview Bill gave around the book's May 2015 release, the framing is more careful. He and Garcia had floated the idea of a hiatus as far back as 1993, quietly, between themselves. The band was making $52 million a year. Dozens of families were on the payroll. The machine was too big to shut down. Look at the language Bill actually uses. He doesn't say he held a vote. He doesn't say he begged. He says, and this is the line that should sit with you, that the only way the band could have helped Jerry was if they all stopped being the Grateful Dead and just refused to play. And then he immediately says it wouldn't have mattered. Jerry would have brought in other musicians. The road would have continued, with or without them.
We couldn't stop playing. The overhead of the business was so demanding that you couldn't just only stop playing because all the people that worked for your crew, your office staff, and the truckers, and the 13 different semis it took to drive your band around would go bad, would break, you know.
Yeah.
That isn't Cassandra. That's something sadder. That's a man watching his best friend die in slow motion and concluding that nobody, including himself, had the standing to stop it. The clearest passage in Deal, the one Chicago Tribune critic Mark Gorino quoted in his review, has Bill watching the front row regulars during 1995 shows. They didn't look high. They didn't look stoned. Bill says they looked strung out, like Jerry. Like everyone had given up at the same time. He saw it every night from 10 feet behind Garcia's amp. And now the part that breaks the popular story wide open. 10 years before Bill ever wrote Deal, Phil Lesh published Searching for the Sound, his 2005 memoir. In it, Phil describes a moment from the 1995 tour, somewhere around Deer Creek, where he got physically ill watching Jerry try to get through a show. He went to the band, he went to management, he told them, in his own words, that he was already packed and didn't want to finish the tour. The promoters led the cheerleading. The show must go on. Garcia was adamant about playing. Phil wearily acquiesced. Read that again. Phil, not Bill, says it was Phil who tried to stop the tour at Deer Creek. So which one is true? The honest answer, the one no deadhead YouTube channel will admit because it ruins the clean narrative, is that they're probably both true. Multiple members of that band, at different moments, in different ways, tried to get off the road. Phil at Deer Creek, Bill in the years leading up to it, Mickey Hart and the band's manager Cameron Sears in private meetings the public never saw. Dennis McNally, the band's official biographer, said in a 2015 oral history that he was already telling people in January, if we get to Boston this fall, past tense, he already wasn't sure they'd make it. Everyone saw it. Everyone tried something. And Garcia would not be moved. The financial machine was real. But the decisive vote was always Jerry's. And Jerry, by every account from inside that organization, kept saying, let's go play. Bill's regret in Deal isn't that nobody listened. His regret is that nothing anyone did would have changed the ending. That's a heavier story than the Cassandra version. It's also the true one. July 9th, 1995, Soldier Field, Chicago. 60,000 people. The last Grateful Dead show with Jerry Garcia. The show was rough. Reviewers in real time described Garcia struggling through nearly every song. Lyrics flubbed across multiple verses. Bill Kreutzmann told Rolling Stone in 2025, when asked about the unreleased Soldier Field tape, listening to it felt uncomfortable because Jerry just looked unhappy and unhealthy and like life wasn't what he wanted it to be. That's Bill's quote. That was his read of his best friend's last performance. Black Muddy River, the planned encore, was the last song Jerry Garcia ever sang lead on. Phil decided in his in-ear monitor that Box of Rain would close. The band stayed on stage to watch the fireworks. Something they had never done before. Garcia walked off stage, found Bob Weir in the corridor, slapped him on the back, said 2 words, always a hoot, and walked away. 1 month later, on August 9th, at 4:23 in the morning, a counselor at Serenity Knolls Rehab in Forest Knolls, California, found Jerry Garcia dead in his bed, heart attack in his sleep. 53 years old. None of his bandmates knew he was at Serenity Knolls. Jerry had told people he was going to Hawaii. The Pact again. Even at the end. Hawaii. Bill Kreutzmann's reaction is one of the most cinematic moments in any rock memoir, and almost nobody has ever quoted it. He drove to the ocean. He paddled out on a surfboard. He didn't try to catch a single wave. He laid flat on the water and cried while waves broke over him. He was, in his own words to Alan Paul, almost paralyzed. 2 days later, at the funeral at St. Stephen's Episcopal in Belvedere, Bill stood at Jerry's open coffin and said 4 words, "I love you, Jerry." Within 72 hours of Jerry's death, 4 men who had spent 30 years inside the same band scattered into 4 completely different responses, and the gap between them tells you everything about what the Grateful Dead actually was. Bob Weir's grief was velocity. Rat Dog had already formed in April 1995, 4 months before Jerry died. On the night of August 9th, Bob was on tour with that band at the Casino Ballroom in Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. He refused to cancel. He told the crowd that great music can make sad times better. Then he played. The next year, the next decade, the next 30. Mickey Hart's grief was the studio. He told Rolling Stone in 1996, the day after Jerry died, he was in the studio. He was finishing Mystery Box, released June 11, 1996, on Rykodisc. He co-headlined the first Further Festival that same summer with Bob and Rat Dog. Mickey's response was to make more music, faster, harder. Phil Lesh's grief was quietest. Phil's Hep C-driven liver was failing. By December 1998, he was on an operating table at Mayo Clinic Jacksonville, receiving a transplant from a young donor named Cody. Phil Lesh and friends didn't seriously begin until late 1997. And then there's Bill. Bill's grief was geography. Honestly, I've read every interview Bill has done since 2011. There is one moment in the 2015 NPR Steve Inskeep audio where Bill says he was in a really bad way and audibly chokes up on tape. 8 seconds of silence, just trying to compose himself. The version of that moment that ended up in Deal is calmer. The version on the radio is the real one. In 1996, the year after Jerry died, Bill Kreutzmann moved to Anahola, a tiny town on the north shore of Kauai. Not Maui, not Oahu, not a celebrity beachfront estate, a local character town on the smallest of the main Hawaiian islands. His own description in Hana Ho: "I came here because I was a wreck." His father had died in October 1995, 2 months after Jerry. His girlfriend was sick. He checked himself into Sierra Tucson rehab. He told his doctor, "Get me in, I can't do this." The man had survived 3 decades of being the Grateful Dead's drummer, 3 decades of road, 3 decades of drugs, 3 decades of carrying the bottom end, and the year Jerry died took all of it down. 3 years later, June 4th, 1998, the Warfield, San Francisco, a new band called The Other Ones debuted. Bob Weir, Phil Lesh, Mickey Hart, Bruce Hornsby, Steve Kimmick, Mark Karen, saxophonist Dave Ellis, and on drums, not Bill Kreutzmann, John Molo, drawn from Bruce Hornsby's band. In the March 5th, 1998 spokesman review announcement of the Other Ones tour, Mickey Hart put it in print. Bill Kreutzmann opted not to join the summer tour. Hart added of his own approach to post-Garcia music: "When it was over, it was over. He wouldn't want to play that music. You can't replace Garcia." The official word for what Bill was doing in 1998, used by his own bandmate, was retired. Bill himself never claimed that word. What he did claim, in the 2015 Alan Paul interview, was something heavier. He said he was still in bad shape. He knew he had to heal himself, so he flew out to see the Other Ones perform live. He wanted to confirm his decision was right. He arrived late. He walked into the venue while the band was already playing Jerry's songs. He stood at the back of the room, and then he walked out. He couldn't be on that stage. It wasn't good enough for him. The man who had sat behind Jerry for 2,300 concerts watched somebody else play Jerry's music for 10 minutes and walked out the door. That single image, The empty seat at the warfield, Bill Kreutzmann standing at the back of his own band's reunion with his arms crossed, leaving before the encore, is the most honest portrait of Grateful Dead grief that exists. Around that same time, Bill quietly formed a small power trio called Backbone. Guitarist Rick Barnett, bassist Ed Cook. The first documented show was July 12, 1997 at the Fillmore. The album dropped January 13, 1998 on Grateful Dead Records. 10 originals plus a cover of New Speedway Boogie. He'd play with them in Hawaii. He'd play with them in tiny clubs. He wasn't ready for stadiums. He wasn't ready for Jerry's songs in front of 50,000 people. Eventually, in 2000, after Phil Lesh stepped away, Bill rejoined what was now a slightly different Other Ones lineup. But that's a story for another video. Two drummers stood on the back of a boat in Kona in the late 1980s and shook hands on a pact. When the band ended, they would go to Hawaii together. Bill kept the promise. He kept it from a small town on the north shore of Kauai called Unahola. He kept it after burying his father. He kept it after burying his best friend. He kept it after watching another drummer take his seat in a ballroom in San Francisco. He kept it alone. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing, because there are more chapters in this band that nobody has told properly, and we're going to tell every one of them. Two drummers shook on it. Only one made it home.